The boy stopped her in the middle of the corridor. He couldn't have been older than 8. Oversized cleaning uniform, sleeves swallowing his wrists, a cart parked beside him like it belonged to someone twice his size. He looked directly at Nia Johnson with the kind of stillness that had no business being on a child's face.
Are you nice to people?
Nia stopped walking.
That's a strange question. I didn't ask if you were smart or busy. I asked if you're nice.
She looked at him properly, completely serious. No trace of shyness, no trace of the self-consciousness she would have expected from a child standing alone in a corporate corridor holding a mop. "I try to be," she said. He nodded once, slowly, like she had just passed a test she didn't know she was taking. Then he pushed the cart forward and disappeared around the corner without another word. Nia stood there for a moment in the middle of the corridor with her laptop bag pulling at her shoulder and her coffee cooling in her hand. She had no idea she had just changed everything. She had been at Hanseon Group for 2 years. 2 years of arriving before anyone else and leaving after most people had gone. 2 years of preparing reports that went into rooms under other people's names. 2 years of being the woman everyone came to when something needed doing and the woman nobody thought of when something needed rewarding. Her supervisor was Director Kang Hyun-woo. He was the kind of man who remembered the chairman's grandchildren's birthdays and forgot to CC Nia on emails that concerned her work. Polished, careful, unfailingly courteous to everyone the chairman could see. Nia had spent 2 years learning the distance between who he was in those moments and who he was everywhere else. The quarterly strategy meeting was on a Thursday. Nia had spent 11 days preparing for it. The numbers, the analysis, the competitive breakdown, the 3-year projection with variable scenarios. She had rehearsed it twice in her apartment at night, standing in her kitchen, talking to no one, timing herself. She was not presenting. Kang was presenting. She sat at the far end of the table with her hands flat on the surface and watched him move through her slides. Her research, her 3 weeks of 14-hour days. The chairman leaned forward at one point, genuinely engaged, and said the projection model was excellent. Kang smiled. "My team put in exceptional work this cycle." Nia looked at the slide on the screen, that phrase in the footnote, that specific way of framing the risk variable. She had written that at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night with cold takeout beside her. She had spent 6 minutes on that one phrase alone because she wanted it precise without being cold. She picked up her pen, put it down, looked at the table in front of her, and kept her face completely still because she had learned, slowly and at considerable personal cost, exactly how much room she was allowed to take up in a room like this. Not enough to say, "I wrote that." Not enough to be anything other than the capable, quiet woman at the end of the table who made things work and smiled when thanked for things she was never thanked for. The chairman nodded at Kang. Kang nodded back. Nia turned a page in her notebook and wrote nothing. That evening, she was still at her desk at 7:40 when most of the floor had emptied. She was cross-referencing annexes when she heard the cartwheels. She looked up. The boy from the corridor was navigating the cart around the corner of the records room, the wheels catching on the carpet edge, his small body leaning into it with more determination than technique. The cart caught badly and lurched. 2 bottles hit the floor. From down the corridor, 2 executives still at their desks laughed without looking up. The boy crouched and started collecting the fallen items without any change in his expression. No embarrassment, no reaction to the laughter. Just quiet, methodical retrieval. Nia watched him. Then she pushed her chair back, walked to the corridor, picked up the spray bottle near the wall and the cloth that had slid to the doorway, and brought them back to the cart. The boy watched her from the corner of his eye. When everything was back in place, he looked at her directly. She recognized him. Same stillness, same serious eyes. "You again," she said. "I work evenings," he said. Then, after a pause, "Those men laughed at me." "I know." "You were the only one who helped." She looked at him. "Someone should have." He studied her face for a moment like he was confirming something. Then he pushed the cart forward and continued down the corridor. Nia went back to her desk. Outside on the street below, a black SUV sat at the building's side entrance, engine running, windows dark. It had been there for 40 minutes. When the security guard finally walked toward it, the vehicle pulled smoothly away from the curb and turned the corner and was gone. Nobody mentioned it in the morning. She saw him twice more that week. The first time was in the break room. She was on her fourth coffee and he was wiping down the counter on the far side, working with the focused efficiency of someone who had done it many times. She watched him over the rim of her cup. "Why do people act differently when a senior director walks in?" he asked without turning around. "Because he decides whether they keep their jobs. So they're not actually happy to see him. Some might be. The ones who changed the fastest," he said. "Those ones were afraid." He finally turned and looked at her. She stared at him. "How old are you?" He didn't answer. He went back to wiping the counter. The second time was in the stairwell. She was heading to the parking level and found him sitting on the third step, back against the wall, watching the space in front of him with his particular stillness. She sat beside him without asking why he was there. "When someone takes credit for what you did," he said, "what do you do?" She was quiet for a moment. "I put the anger somewhere it can't make me stupid. Anger makes you move too fast. Moving too fast means mistakes. Mistakes are what people like him are waiting for." He turned to look at her. "Does being patient fix it?" "Not always." "Then why do it?" "Because at least I'm not the one who did something wrong." He looked back at the wall in front of him. Thought about that for a while. She stood to leave. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not lying." She looked back at him once. Then she took the stairs down and didn't see the black SUV idling again at the side entrance, darker now against the evening, waiting with the patience of something that had been waiting a long time already. 3 weeks after the boy first appeared, the Daesong acquisition file went missing. It was not just any file. The physical folder contained original signed letters of intent, private valuation assessments, and 2 pages of handwritten margin notes from the chairman himself that had never been digitized. The acquisition was worth $430 million. Missing documents meant a potential collapse of the entire deal. The building locked down before noon. Kang called an emergency session. Nia sat at the far end of the table and watched him lay out the situation, and she watched him do the thing she had seen him do before. That slight pause before he looked in her direction. That performance of reluctance before he said what he had already decided to say. "The file was last accessed," he said, sliding a printed log across the table, "by one person, at 8:47 last night after hours." He looked at Nia. The room looked at Nia. Her name on the log, her access card, her employee number, the timestamp of a woman who had stayed late alone with a file that was now gone. "I didn't take it," she said. "Nobody is making an accusation," Kang said, with the tone of a man making a very clear one. "My name is on that log because I was retrieving the quarterly annexes. The acquisition folder was in the same cabinet. I didn't open it. I didn't touch it." "The camera in that corridor," Kang said, folding his hands, "experienced a technical fault between 8:40 and 9:15. The silence that followed was the kind that meant everyone had already made a decision, but nobody wanted to be first to say it out loud. Nia went back to her desk and started from the beginning. She pulled her own calendar, her keycard swipes for the entire week, her email timestamps. She mapped every minute of her movements and cross-referenced it against what she knew about the file's location. The camera fault was too clean. It covered exactly the window of time that mattered. Not 5 minutes before, not 10 minutes after. Exactly the right window. Someone had planned this. She submitted her findings to HR by 3 o'clock. HR acknowledged receipt at 4:45. She sent the same findings to the chairman's office. His assistant called back and said the chairman was unavailable this week. She sat at her desk and looked at the screen and breathed slowly through her nose and thought about what she had told the boy in the stairwell. "Patience. Don't move too fast. Don't give them the mistake they're waiting for. It was considerably harder to believe when the walls were already closing. She lost people fast, not all at once. One by one, quietly, the way a room empties when someone opens a window in winter. The junior analyst who had once told her she was the only reason he hadn't quit crossed to the other side of the corridor the next morning. She saw it happen. He looked directly at her, registered her face, and redirected, chose a longer route to his desk rather than pass hers. She stood at her workstation with her hand half raised from a wave she had already started. She lowered it, sat down, opened her screen, and kept working because stopping felt like handing someone something she wasn't willing to give. Only the boy still came. He appeared at her desk that afternoon and asked without preamble, "What if nobody believes you?" "Then I tell the truth anyway. Even if it doesn't work?" "Especially then." He stood there for a moment, then, "I believe you." She looked up at him, the first real smile she'd managed in 2 days. "You're 8 years old." "I still count," he said. She laughed despite everything, and it surprised her, the sound of it, how it felt like something she had been keeping in a closed fist and had just let go of without meaning to. On the 4th day, they suspended her. 2 people from HR came to her desk at 10 in the morning. One of them read from a printed letter in a voice that had been trained to carry no temperature. "Formal suspension, pending investigation, escorted from the premises." Nia closed her laptop. She picked up her bag. She stood up and she did not look at Kang's office, though she could feel him watching from behind the glass. She did not look at the junior analyst's desk. She did not look at anyone because if she found a face that still had something human in it, that would be the thing that broke her, and she would not give this building that. She walked to the elevator. The doors opened and closed, and she was gone. The corridor stayed quiet for a moment. Then someone went back to their desk. Then someone else. Then everyone. Because the work was still there, and the building was still turning, and a person could disappear from a place without the place itself even noticing. She sat on the low concrete steps outside the building's side entrance and stared at her phone without seeing it. Traffic moved on the street with the indifferent consistency of things that had no opinion about what had just happened. A delivery driver went past on a bicycle. A woman walked a very small dog. The world was entirely unaffected. She heard the cartwheels before she saw him. The boy came around the side of the building and stopped when he saw her. He looked at her face. Then he parked the cart against the wall and sat down on the step beside her without asking permission, the way children do when they have decided that something simply needs to be done. They sat without speaking for almost a full minute. "If you leave," he said finally, "who will be nice to people here?" Something tightened in her chest. She kept looking at the street. "Someone else will." "I don't think so." Not dramatically, just a quiet observation that he found genuinely troubling. "I've been watching for 3 weeks. You're the only one." She looked at him. His face was serious the way it always was, except now there was something underneath it that looked, on a child that young, remarkably close to grief. "Don't be sorry for me," she said. "I'm not sorry for you. You did nothing wrong." A pause. "I'm sorry it happened to you." She nodded, breathed. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "remember what you saw, okay? Whatever they say, you remember what you actually saw." He turned and looked at her directly. "I will." Not reassurance, something harder than that, a decision that had already been made sitting inside 2 words. She didn't notice. She was looking at the street again, running the arithmetic of a life that had just been deliberately broken. How long the savings would last, whether she could afford a lawyer, whether any of it was going to matter. When she turned back, the step beside her was empty. The cart was still against the wall. The boy was gone. The next morning, nobody could find him. Building services had no formal record of a child on the cleaning roster. The janitor on the 9th floor confirmed there had been a boy. Small, quiet, paid attention to everything, had assumed he was someone's relative helping out. Security checked the entry logs. The most recent record matching his description was 4 days ago. The cleaning cart sat in the hallway outside the records room with no one claiming it. People mentioned it briefly and moved on because a missing child was not technically a corporate facilities problem unless someone made it one, and nobody was going to make it one today because there were other things to do. And Nia Johnson's termination meeting was set for Friday morning, and that was the thing the building was currently organized around. Inside the building, Director Kang was winning. The investigation had moved with the efficiency of a process designed to reach a specific conclusion. Evidence consistent. Timeline holding. Access log unambiguous. Nia's own submission reviewed and found to contain nothing that materially changed the picture. Full board attendance. The chairman presiding. Criminal referral to follow if approved. Kang prepared with care. He had done this before. Not this exact configuration, but the shape of it. The careful assembly of a case against someone who had no remaining allies in the room. He was good at it. He had learned early that the most effective way to protect yourself was to ensure the threat was neutralized completely, not just professionally, reputationally. So thoroughly that even if the person eventually tried to speak, nobody would consider it worth hearing. He thought about Nia Johnson and felt nothing in particular. That was the thing about people like Kang. It was not cruelty exactly. It was the complete absence of whatever thing would have made cruelty feel like something. Friday morning. The boardroom on the 42nd floor had floor-to-ceiling glass on the east side and a view of the Han River that the chairman had once described to a journalist as the best in the city. The table seated 20. All 20 seats were filled. Nia sat at the far end alone on her side of the table. No lawyer. Her documents in a folder, timeline printed and annotated. She had thought through every question they might ask, and she had answers for all of them, and she was sitting very still in the way people sit still when stillness is the only thing that still belongs entirely to them. Kang opened the meeting, measured, precise, regretful in the way people are regretful when they have rehearsed it carefully enough that it no longer resembles a performance. He spoke about the company's obligation to stakeholders, the sensitivity of the acquisition, what it meant when trust was broken in an environment that ran entirely on trust. He never said her name once. The employee, the individual in question, the relevant party, as though removing the name was a final courtesy extended to someone on their way out. He placed the termination papers on the table and slid them toward the chairman. The chairman reached for them. His pen came out. Nia's hand tightened around her folder under the table where no one could see it. She watched the pen move toward the paper and she thought, "This is it. This is the moment," and she opened the folder. "Before any decision is made," she said, "I need to address 3 things this investigation has not explained." Kang looked up, a half smile, patient, prepared for this. "Nia." The camera fault lasted exactly 35 minutes. Her voice was steady. She had decided before she walked in that she would not let it shake. Not a general malfunction. 35 minutes, beginning 4 minutes before my card logged me in that corridor and ending 9 minutes after I left the floor. I pulled the building's maintenance records. No scheduled work that evening. No fault logged with the security provider. Someone triggered that outage manually. The pen stopped moving. Second, Cabinet 12 requires a separate authorization code I have never been issued. The acquisition folder lives in Cabinet 12. My clearance level does not reach it. If I had taken that folder, I would have needed a code that is not on my access profile. This investigation has not explained how I accessed a cabinet my clearance doesn't cover. Kang's expression had not changed, but something behind it had. A slight recalibration. The look of a man who had walked into a room confident the furniture was where he left it and is finding things slightly displaced. She felt it and kept going. Third, 3 other folders at the same classification level were in that cabinet, all untouched. If I were selling documents, why take 1 and leave 3? If I were trying to damage this company, those other folders would have been far more effective. She closed the folder. Her hands were trembling under the table, not from fear, from the effort of holding everything she was feeling inside a voice that sounded like it wasn't feeling anything. This was not a theft. It was a setup, built by someone with access to the security system, authorization above my clearance level, and a very specific interest in removing me from this building. The room was completely still. Kang set his pen down, looked at her. The recognition in his eyes was not what she had expected. Not panic, something colder. The look of a man recalculating, determining what was still salvageable. "These are serious allegations," he said carefully. "I understand you're under considerable stress, but without actual evidence, what you're describing is—" Then from downstairs they heard it. Vehicles. Multiple. The kind of sound that doesn't belong to a Friday morning in a corporate tower. Someone at the window said it first, not a question. The flat statement of someone seeing something their brain hadn't finished processing yet. Others stood, looked down 42 floors to where a convoy of black vehicles had sealed the building's main entrance with a precision that was not accidental. Men in dark clothing moved through the lobby with coordinated efficiency. The building's own security had stepped back without being asked. The chairman stood. "Who authorized?" "Nobody," said a board member. Strange voice. "Nobody authorized this." Kang was at the window now. For the first time that morning, his face was doing something he had not planned for it to do. The chairman's pen was still in his hand. He had not signed. The lobby fell quiet the way a room goes quiet when something enters it that the room was not designed to hold. Jang Tai-o walked through the main doors and stopped in the center of the lobby. He was not a large man, not visibly armed, dark suit, no tie, hands in his pockets. He looked around the lobby slowly with the unhurried attention of a man who had already made every decision and was now simply moving through the final steps of executing them. A woman at the reception desk picked up her phone and then put it back down without dialing. Two men near the elevator found reasons to look elsewhere. Every person Jang Tai-o made eye contact with looked away first. He located the building manager, and the building manager crossed to him without quite deciding to, the way a body responds to gravity. "My son was in this building," Jang Tai-o said. Quiet, almost conversational. "Take me to where he is." The building manager opened his mouth, closed it, took him to the elevator. The boardroom doors opened without a knock. Kang was already on his feet. "This is a closed board session. You cannot walk in here. Security will—" Jang Tai-o looked at him. Just looked. No expression that could be named. No raised voice. No visible threat. Just the steady attention of a man who had located what he came for and was taking a moment before he decided what to do next. Kang's voice stopped. His mouth kept moving for approximately 2 seconds after the sound quit. Several board members would recall that specific detail later, each of them describing it the same way as the moment the room understood what kind of man had just walked into it. The boy came in behind his father, still in the cleaning uniform, sleeves still folded back. He walked past the door, past the board members on the right side of the table, past his father, past the chairman, all the way to the far end. He stopped beside Nia. The room watched him reach up and take her hand. Nia looked down at him. Her face moved through several things in rapid succession. Shock, recognition, something that was still working out what it was looking at. "You work here," she said. "I don't work here." He looked up at her. "I was learning." The chairman found his voice. "Who is this child?" Jang Tai-o moved to the center of the table. He did not sit. He stood with his hands at his sides and looked around at 20 people who were all, in various ways, trying to decide how to hold their faces. "My son," he said. "He has been in this building for 23 days. Silence. "None of you noticed." Nobody said anything. "He was here because I wanted him to understand something, not from a classroom, not from a boardroom, from the ground." A pause. "He learned more than I expected." The boy looked at Director Kang. Kang had moved slightly toward the door during the disruption. One of the men who had entered with Jang Tai-o was standing near the exit with no particular expression and no particular urgency. Just standing there, the way a wall stands. Kang stopped moving. "Director Kang," the boy said. The room went still in a new way. "On the evening of the 14th at 9:22, you went back to the records room after Nia left. I was in the service corridor. The door was open." He reached into the pocket of the cleaning uniform. "I recorded it." He placed a small device on the table. Kang moved. He was across the room faster than someone in his position should have been, hand reaching for the recorder, face completely stripped of every layer he had spent years constructing. Nothing left in it now but the raw, forward motion of a man trying to stop something before it became permanent. Jang Tai-o stepped forward once. He didn't touch Kang, didn't raise his hands, moved into the space between Kang and the table, and Kang stopped as though he had walked into something solid, because in every way that mattered, he had. The two men stood 2 feet apart. Kang looked at Jang Tai-o's face. Whatever he found there walked him backwards slowly until he reached his chair and sat down in it and straightened his jacket and looked around the room and found in every face something that was not going to help him. He looked at the table. The recording played through the room's speaker system. Kang's voice filled the boardroom. Clear, unhurried, the voice of a man who had believed completely that he was alone. The board heard him open cabinet 12 with his own authorization code, heard him explain to someone on a phone exactly what he was doing and why, heard him describe the camera outage he had arranged through a contact in building security, heard the satisfaction in his voice as he talked through each piece, the access log, the timing, the way the evidence would sit when it was found. Then they heard him say her name. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, each time as the answer to a question about who would take the fall, each time in the same tone. Practical, unbothered, the tone of a man discussing a logistical detail rather than a person's life. Then near the end, a short laugh. Brief, satisfied. The recording ended. The ventilation system hummed. Nobody moved. Kang opened his mouth. The recording could have been altered. There are ways to... Stop. The chairman's voice was very quiet. The quiet of a man who had been made to look like a fool in front of his entire board by someone he had trusted completely and who was going to need a long time alone to sit with what that meant. "Don't say another word to me." Kang closed his mouth. He looked at the table. He looked at Yang Tai-o. He looked at the boy. The boy looked back at him without blinking, without anger, without any of the things Kang might have known how to respond to. Just watching. The way he had always been watching. Kang looked away first. There was nothing left to build. Security took Kang to the conference room on the 38th floor while the legal team was called. The criminal referral intended for Nia was redirected with a thoroughness that suggested everyone in the room understood how badly this needed to be done correctly. The acquisition documents were located in Kang's personal storage within the hour. Undamaged, exactly where he had put them. Board members made calls. Others drafted statements. The room that had been organized around Nia's destruction reorganized itself around Kang's with the same efficiency, the same absence of hesitation, the same collective willingness to move quickly and look forward and not spend too long examining what it said about all of them that it had gotten this far. The chairman stood at the head of the table after the others had begun moving. He looked at Nia. He was 71 years old and had spent 50 years in rooms like this projecting certainty because certainty was the currency these rooms ran on. What was on his face now was something he had not shown a room in a very long time. It was not comfortable for him. That was visible. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not the corporate we." Nia looked at him steadily. "Yes, you do." He nodded. "I'm sorry." It was not enough. They both knew that without saying it. But it was real, and in a building that had spent weeks manufacturing things that were false, Real counted for something even when it wasn't enough. Outside in the corridor, the light came in flat and gray from the north-facing windows. Jang Tae-o stood with his son. The boy was watching Nia through the glass panel. She was still at the table answering questions from the legal team, her folder open in front of her, her posture exactly what it had been all morning. Straight, steady, still working. "Why her?" his father asked. The boy kept watching her. "The first evening I dropped the cart. Everything went on the floor." Two men laughed. His father waited. "She got up from her desk, picked everything up with me. Didn't ask whose kid I was, didn't ask if I was supposed to be there." He paused. "Then she asked me if I was okay." Jang Tae-o looked at his son. Nobody else did that. Not that evening. Not in 23 days. The boy's eyes stayed on Nia through the glass. "I watched people walk past her work every day. I watched them use her and forget her and let her stand in a room where someone was taking everything she built, and she never stopped. She never started treating people the way they were treating her." A pause. "She stayed exactly the same." Jang Tae-o looked through the glass at the woman still sitting straight in her chair doing the work. "She also told me," the boy said quietly, "to remember what I saw." His father looked down at him. "So I did." Something shifted in Jang Tae-o's expression. Not large, but present. "You chose well," he said. The boy looked up at him. "I know." Nia came out of the boardroom 40 minutes later. The corridor was mostly empty. The boy was leaning against the wall across from the doors, hands in the pockets of the cleaning uniform, waiting with a particular patience that seemed to be simply how he was built. She stopped. They looked at each other. "You recorded him," she said. "Yes." "The whole time. You were watching the whole time." "Yes." She looked at the ceiling for a moment, breathed, then back at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to know if you would keep being who you were when you thought nobody was watching, even when it wasn't helping you." He met her eyes. "You did." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she crossed the corridor and crouched down to his eye level, the same way she had crouched down that first evening to help him pick up what he had dropped. Same height, same distance between them. "Are you nice to people?" she asked. He considered it with the seriousness he brought to everything. "I'm learning to be." She smiled, full and unguarded and real, the kind that had been unavailable to her for several weeks, the kind that comes out the other side of something rather than before it. "That's the right answer," she said. She stood, looked at him one last time. "Go find your father." He pushed off the wall, straightened the oversized uniform with both hands, and walked down the corridor. He didn't look back. Nia watched him go. Then she turned and walked the other way. She had work to do. If this story held you from the first scene to the last, you already know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe to AfroKDramaVerse so you never miss a story like this, and drop a comment below right now telling us, at what moment did you first suspect the boy was not who he appeared to be? We read every single one.